Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and in this video, we'll be unboxing the February 2025 SketchBox. This box is all about exploring pastels and playing with a variety of blending tools and edges. Ready? Let's go. The surface in this box is the Rembrandt toned pastel paper in cream. It has a slightly textured surface that is designed to grab and hold pastel particles, but it is still smooth enough to render fine details. Next, we have the Bronzeal pastel pencil in Havana Brown. This is the darkest color we will be working with this month, and it will be perfect for creating crisp edges and contrast. It's also an ideal tool for drawing those smaller details that I mentioned earlier. By playing around with the amount of pressure I apply, I can create darker and lighter values with my pastel pencil. I used the medium stick sponge, one of 2 stick sponges found in this month's box, to blend out the gradient and work the pigment deeper into the tooth of the paper for a more even coverage. After blending, I re-established my darker values with the pastel pencil, bringing more pressure and more pigment to the left side of the gradient. The next product is the SketchBox Signature Artist Pastel in Cloud White. This unique pastel will allow you to lighten all of the other colors in this month's box. Using the black blender, I'll apply some Cloud White and use it to create a gradient between the Cloud White, which is the lightest value in our box, and the Havana Brown, which is the darkest. I can go back and forth between these two mediums, easily mixing them together to create tints of the Havana Brown. The prompt for this month is desert. Let's use the pastel pencil, our Cloud White, and a variety of blending tools to study value as we draw this beautiful desert raptor. Beginning with my pastel pencil, I start with a light sketch, focusing on the basic shapes first, and then slowly build up more and more detail when I feel confident with my basic proportions. As I begin to build up more and more of the form, I also begin to establish the shadow shapes and apply some value to the underside of the chest and the belly. When applying value, look at where the shadows are on the form and not just what the local color is. Using the Cloud White, I block in the light shapes, and this isn't just where the falcon is white, it's anywhere that the light is hitting. Across the top of the head and along the back, and of course on that white leg out in the front. Once I understand how my lights and darks are organized, I come back in with the Havana Brown to sharpen the details, add texture, and deepen the values. Because this is a value study and doesn't include a wide range of colors, creating contrast with the values I'm using is important for separating the subject, which is the bird, from the background. That's why I added some brown behind the bird's head. This allows me to show the edge of the bird's head without physically outlining every part of it. When I work with pastels, I focus on larger shapes and textures more than tiny details, and that's especially true with this hawk. I add more of an implied feather texture by layering and building up and blending rather than drawing individual feathers. I also play around with where the edges are hard, like under the wing and along the edge of the belly, and also where the value transitions are softer, like in the face where the cheek would be or near the shoulder. And I blend out accordingly. You can use this combination of supplies to create value studies of any subject you're interested in drawing. Next, we have a custom set of pan pastels in 3 highly pigmented colors: magenta shade, diarylide yellow, and turquoise shade. We also have a set of soft tool sponges. These sponges come in a variety of shapes that allow us to create unique textures and a variety of edges. Let's begin by swatching the turquoise shade with the flat rectangular prism sponge. What I love about this sponge is it allows me to create really crisp edges, and because there are so many distinct edges on this sponge, I can easily twist it to a new edge and use it to apply another color, which I did with the diarylide yellow and the magenta. Between the diarylide yellow and the turquoise shade edges of this sponge, I am going to mix up a green, and I can do this right inside the pan of the pan pastels. I start with a hue of green that is right in the center, and then I manipulate that green, adding more yellow on the left and more turquoise on the right. Then I can play around with the pressure of my sponge and my mixtures to create a really smooth, even gradient. The last item in our box is the Pentel High Polymer Soft Eraser. The hard, crisp edges on this eraser will allow us to remove pastel or to draw subtractively. Play around with different ways that you can use this eraser to create textures, shapes, and a variety of different effects with your pastels. Let's use our rounded edge sponge to explore color mixing and texture a little bit more. I'm creating a gradient from magenta shade to diarylide yellow, mixing up those transitionary colors in between. But the mark that I'm using is quite a bit different. Here I am dabbing the loaded sponge onto the paper so that I can keep that semicircle shape and use it to build up a texture. You can use a loose sheet of paper to create a hard edge by applying pastel right over the top. On this month's insert, we explored how to do this with chrome. Let's use this same technique to create a more organic shape, the delicate arch from Southern Utah. Begin with a light, loose sketch of your arch using the Brunzil pastel pencil. Then grab a loose sheet of paper and one of your sponges with a hard edge. I began by mixing up an orange with about equal parts magenta shade and the diarylide yellow. Then I looked at my photo reference and identified those lightest, brightest oranges. Then I applied them onto my arch using this straight edge loose paper technique. While the loose leaf paper technique will give you the hardest edges, you don't need to use this technique everywhere. I use this technique again for the shadows on the arch using a combination of magenta shade and turquoise shade. This gave me a darker color and allowed me to create those nice crisp edges. Once all the basic colors are mapped in, I can use sponges to blend out some of the transitions and my eraser to clean up the edges of my arch. I then transition over to the pastel pencil. This tool is ideal for fine details and allows me to add some of that rock texture and to deepen the value in a few places. It really levels up my arch, and I was able to create this super quickly because with pan pastels, I can lay down so much color at once. Now let's put everything together and create a desert landscape. Here I came in directly with my sponge loaded up with pan pastels. You can lay down a quick sketch first if you'd like, but for a simple landscape, you might enjoy the immediacy of diving right in with your sponges. After laying in the rock formation in the background, I came in with a bit of the turquoise shade and cloud white mixed together for the lighter value in the sky. And then I mapped in some darker clouds with a combination of turquoise shade and magenta shade. I used this same combination for the shadows on the rock formation in the background. I made sure to get the whole background mapped in, softening the edges a little bit so that all of that feels further away, and then I began working on the foreground. For the midground and the foreground, there is a lot of space with grasses, and I want to start by figuring out how the light and shade are organized. There is that band of golden light hitting the midground, and then in the foreground, I see more contrast, so I apply my colors accordingly. I really liked using this V-shaped sponge with the point facing down because it gave me a really nice shrubbery texture and didn't require that I draw each one individually. I played around with a bunch of color combinations, sometimes referring right to my photo reference and other times just riffing off my imagination. But the thing that I always kept in mind was my value. I really wanted to make sure that I was able to keep that light and dark distribution consistent with my photo reference. At this point, I have pastel over the entire surface of my paper, and this gives me a really unique opportunity to work additively as I add more pastel and pastel pencil, and subtractively as I remove it with my eraser. Right now, I am adding in some of that detail that I wasn't able to get with the large sponges, some texture to the grasses, and as I move around the piece, I notice that there's some areas I want to add a little bit more color to or to tweak the color slightly. Now I'm using that subtractive process, using my high polymer eraser to pull the pigment off and bring back that cream color of the paper. This allows me to give a really nice convincing texture to all of those grasses. As you work on your landscapes, one tip to keep in mind is that those objects in the front or in the foreground are going to have the most detail and the most contrast, whereas those objects furthest away in the background are going to have the fuzziest edges and are going to have the least amount of detail. Use this tip to create tons of space and dimension in your desert landscapes this month. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about working with pastels and a variety of blending techniques. We can't wait to see what you create, so be sure to use the hashtag SketchBoxFebuary when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can check out our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.